I'm going to turn the controls over to Amy Stapleton, an analyst at Opus, to introduce our next panel and start talking about a very important topic around sort of where what working in customer care lately in large organizations, we've been hearing that there's the memo that comes from the C-suites that says, what is our bot strategy? And gives you a lot to think about. So with that in mind, here's Amy.
Hey, Dan, do I just advance it with?
Sure.
Oh, okay.
What's that? Is that the right one?
No.
I have it up.
That's it? Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so what we want to talk about now is something that's obviously on everybody's mind, I think. And what's your bot strategy? And I'm Amy Stapleton. I joined Opus in January, for those of you that don't know me. Previously, I was an IT manager at NASA, and so now I am working as an analyst here at Opus. And I want to thank the panelists for joining me for this discussion. When we think about bots, I know Dan and I have often had the conversation, what is a bot versus what is a typical virtual assistant, a virtual agent? For the purposes of this conversation, I really want to focus on bots on messaging platforms. So what we think of as chatbots today, with the announcement of Facebook that they have the bot framework, the whole interest around messaging platforms with bots on those platforms. So that's kind of what I want to focus on with bot strategy. So the first question that I have, which I'm going to, actually I want, before I start with my questions, give each of you guys an opportunity just to introduce yourselves very briefly and then talk about what your involvement is or what your company's involvement is around this chatbot bot space.
Sure. So I'm Matt Schlicht. And I've been doing a lot in the world of messaging for maybe the past year. And the biggest reason for that is because more people use messaging apps than social networks now. And so every business needs to have a strategy. So 4.5 months ago, when Facebook announced that you could build bots on the Facebook platform, I created a community for bot developers, which now has 13,000 people in it. It's the largest one in the world. I created a publication called Chatbots Magazine, which is entirely focused on chatbots, and it reaches about 200,000 people every month. And then I wrote an introductory guide on chatbots, which, if you want to read it, go to Google, type in chatbots, it's the first result. So I've talked to thousands of bot developers, companies who want bots, investors who want to fund bots, startups who want the investors to fund them. So I have a lot of perspective on people building bots.
You're a bot maniac.
I've been called many things.
You're a bot man.
And Botman is one of them.
My name is Brian Shivler. I'm with the Trumage Interactive Group, and what we do is build human avatars to communicate on an omni-channel platform. And so one of the things that we run into more and more now is that people are looking at strategies for how, if you're looking at your entire, IVA communication platform, do intelligent virtual assistants and bots work together to build an experience that can be one of a kind and can create a competitive advantage.
Hi, I'm Joe Gagnon with Aspect Software. I have 3 jobs there. I'm general manager for our cloud business globally. I'm the chief customer officer, and I'm responsible for our product strategy. I would say that my mission and purpose is to get our 2,000 customers to do what they do today better in the future using a bot as part of their strategy.
Okay, great. So now I'm going to kick it off with some questions. The first one, Matt, is for you. So it's still pretty early in terms of the maturity cycle around chatbots on messaging platforms. So I guess the question is, from your perspective, do you think that companies should go ahead and start creating bots now, or do you think it's better to take a sort of a let's wait and look to see how this thing develops before we jump in?
Yeah, so I think, in my conversations with companies who are interested in bots, which ranges from a mechanic in the middle of the United States to multi-billion-dollar companies who are trying to figure out what their strategy is. First, the number one thing I've kind of recognized is that when everybody hears the term chatbots, which maybe even in this audience, first they think that a chatbot refers to this like artificially intelligent person who is going to imitate like what you get when you go into a store, and you're going to be able to have a full-on conversation with them. Where the technology is today is it's not there, right? You're not going to have chatbots that are being put out by companies on Facebook quite yet that are completely conversational. The bots that are going to be the most successful right now are bots that are lightweight applications that are delivered via messaging platforms. To the question of should companies be building bots now or should they wait till they mature, I think they should definitely be doing that now, and then they're going to be able to grow as bots develop. Maybe it would be similar to saying, if the internet just came out, do you think you should make a website now, or do you think you should wait till social media comes around? And you should definitely start immediately.
Okay. So that brings me then to the next question for Brian. Do you think then that there's risks to starting now? And I guess, Matt kind of touched on the fact that maybe people have unrealistic expectations. So if you were to create a chatbot now that maybe did not meet those expectations, could that be problematic for a brand, or what's your thinking around that?
I think it could, but I don't think that's a reason not to start. I think in this case, immaturity is really a state of mind, and I think that there are really two keys to doing this well. One is knowing in your heart that the magnitude of success will live and die with the data that's driving the interactions. And the second thing is you've got to have an ongoing commitment to a use case or use cases that are very personal to your customers. And if you can solve a problem, a challenge for your customer quickly and efficiently, they will appreciate that. And what we see is, and the reason I'm talking about data is because, you would expect me to say this, doing what we do with human avatars, I believe whether it's a chatbot or you're working with an IVA, it's all about intent and the sensitivity by which the message is delivered. And being clean on your data is a key to that. And so I think there's always risks, but I think in this particular case, waiting is not the answer, because this is the communication realm of your customer base today, and it's what they've come to expect. I think to your point, Amy, it's up to us to train them in how to use the technology that we've created that's a presumed solution for them, as opposed to inundating or deluging them with types of communication without teaching them how to use it.
Okay. So then the next question, I'm going to send it out to Joe, and everybody else can comment afterwards if you want, but that's kind of a big question, and that's, from your experience, how are you seeing companies deploying chatbots now? It's still early, but what are you seeing people doing, and what's kind of, companies doing, what's successful, maybe what's not as successful?
Okay, I'd like to just comment a little bit on the prior two questions and lead into that. If you've spent any time in retail, like I have most of my life, your first day employee doesn't know a single thing, and you put them on the floor, and customers come up and ask them questions, and they don't know the answer. But you still employ them. So what would be the problem of having a bot that didn't know something on its first day? So you already do this, so get over it, please. So there's no risk, because you run a business with that risk today, and actually, we might be able to do better with the bot on day one than we could with the employee, and probably will. I used to have Walmart as a customer, and I went into 85 stores one summer, and I tried to ask a question, the same question of every store employee, and they used to run away, which is, what's the difference between, a plasma television and an LCD? And they didn't know the answer. They never would. So we have to be able to do the things that we can't even do well today, and so we have to get to it. So there's really actually only risk if you don't do this. That's the risk. And the reason is that the half-life of companies is about 10 years now. It's not 100 like it used to be. So therefore, your competition will catch you faster. If you're in the banking industry right now and you don't think this is a good idea, just wait 5 years and you will be out of business. Because what you can't do today is respond to the needs of the customer. So what should you be doing? I think about this sort of in a silly way, right? There's 3 things that have happened that have come together that make this very, very easy. This isn't no longer a technology adoption curve issue. I already own one of these. I know how to ask questions. I learned that when I was 2, and I know how to type with my thumbs. Technology adoption curve is over. Facebook Messenger is on my phone, or WhatsApp, by the way, they've announced in 60 days they will support messaging just like Facebook Messenger. And you have WeChat. We have almost 3 billion people around the planet who have the platform. That's part 4. So there is no issue. The only issue is, can we get our heads wrapped around how this integrates within the core of what a customer has, which is a question. Can we answer their questions? Today, we make it very hard to do that. And it is very easy because we already learned that. So let's translate what would be the questions that a customer would ask. So just as a practical example, we've been working with the Radisson Hotel Group in the UK. Michael Morini, the CIO, I convinced him after 1.5 years to try this. I said, can't we create a better hotel experience? So we launched Edward, the virtual assistant, your virtual host. So when you check into the hotel, you get a text or a messenger message that says, welcome to the Radisson Blu Edwardian. I'm Edward, your virtual host. So when we started, we thought there might be somewhere around 100 questions that customers might ask. After the past 7 months, we found out there's about 400. The domain is small of what people want to know in any of the businesses that we run. So it's not actually that hard to know what the questions are if we start doing it. In the first month, was it frustrating? Oh yeah, he wanted to kill me. But we learned. And now, about a month ago, a customer walked to the front desk and said, it was an older lady, and she had a 10 quid note and said, I would like to leave a tip for Edward. He was the best staff you've ever had. 3 days later, no joke, you can call Michael and ask, a guy came up to the front desk and said, I would love to shake Edward's hand because it was an extraordinary experience. So we went right at it. But what happened was the way it worked was we integrate to the res system, we integrate to the housekeeping system, we integrate to the food and beverage system because the data, the most commonly asked question, if you're in the UK, you'll understand why this question's asked, is breakfast included in my room rate? And I'll finish on this because I could go on all day. So I said to Michael, wow, it sounds like we got a problem. The problem is, why don't you tell them this ahead of time? Why are they asking the question in the hotel? We've got your root cause issue. He's like, silly boy. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. He said, I don't really need them to know what they need to know until they need to know it. Follow me? When do you want to ask that question? 7:30 in the morning, 8 o'clock, when you're going to eat breakfast, not the day before because they tell you, not 2 weeks before when you made your reservation and they sent you an email. Never, ever until you need to know it. And the only way to get that answer is with a nice bot, because calling the front desk at 8:30 in the morning is next to useless. But if I just type in, Edward, is breakfast included in my room rate? And Edward says yes, then you're satisfied. And we could go on with 100 other examples of like that, what we have learned. So all of you have to start now because the technology is ready and it'll learn with you and it will be way better than your employees soon enough and they'll be tipping Edward over and over again.
And just to spring off of that real quickly, something that's a key that we find to performance is you've picked a use case that's very defined, you understand the domain, and you know you're going to fail in the beginning. Plan for it. They were ready to kill you the first month, right? We started, and I will bet that the Radisson told you with some degree of certainty, these are the 100 questions.
Oh, yeah.
We know our customers. And this, to me, is the most beautiful thing about all of this, because every implementation we do teaches our client partners infinitely more about their customers and what they need and want than they ever knew before we started to communicate in this way. And that's the true value. That assimilation is what has to be planned for in the future, because it's an iterative process.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that everything you guys are talking about is customer support. And when people hear chatbots, the first thing they think of is customer support. They've maybe interacted with a chatbot on a website. But after talking to these thousands of businesses who are interested in chatbots, what's interesting is that a lot of them aren't actually reaching out about customer support. A lot of them are looking to use chatbots as an extension of what they do on Twitter, as an extension of what they do on Facebook, as an extension of what they do on email lists, and they're looking to chatbots as a way to add a new distribution channel for something like getting new content out, making an announcement about a new product. And so I think customer support is definitely a super, super interesting use case for chatbots. But when thinking about what you're going to do for your business, take a second to think of chatbots as a new distribution channel where you could have 1 million followers on Twitter, 1 million email addresses, 1 million fans on Facebook. But if you had 1 million people who opted into receiving an update when you come out with a new product or a new piece of content on a bot with Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, when you push that out, every single person is going to instantly get it on their phone as if they had installed a native app, which potentially could be the most powerful distribution channel that you could have.
Okay, so I think that answered my next question for you, which was what kinds of use cases are you seeing? And so you've seen things that are other than customer support, more promotional? Or
yeah, so people, like I said, customer support is the first thing everybody wants to know. It's natural, right? Everybody has questions. The business knows that there's these 100 questions or these 50 questions that everybody asks, but they also want to promote new content. They want to promote new merchandise. Everybody is fascinated with this idea of having a fictional character on Facebook that someone can talk to. So whether you're a TV show or a movie or a new book,
right,
or even a band, everybody really likes this idea of, hey, what if we could put out a chatbot that imitated this character on the TV show, and then everybody could talk to it, and then the chatbot could send out messages on each episode that comes out. So I think nobody knows what the number one use case is, and like the internet in general, there probably is not one number one use case. Everyone's going to be doing customer support, but I think that over the next 6 months, people are going to come up with use cases that we probably haven't really thought of yet.
Right, and I read, I think just a couple of days ago, there was a survey that Twilio had conducted where the respondents, like 56% of the respondents said that they wanted to actively engage with brands through a messaging platform. And you have to, maybe it's a little suspect because of who did the survey. They also said 50% wanted to use SMS as opposed to 36% maybe Facebook Messenger. But it's interesting because how do they want to engage with brands? Do they want to engage specifically for customer support or in other more personal ways to find out information about products or to get promotional information or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things is, younger generations spend all of their time in messaging apps, and they don't spend their time in email. So no matter if it's customer support or if it's promotional or if it's some sort of social, experience, it makes sense for businesses to figure out what is your strategy going to be to kind of translate that to the messaging platforms.
Right.
If you really want to know the answer, just go to China. 600 million people use this every day. So like another one, let's get over it. If we think this doesn't work, 600 million people every day live in WeChat. That's where they start and end their day, every bit. Conversational, commerce, etc. The one use case that we've been selling is this idea of this, we call it Mila, My Intelligent Learning Assistant. It's for the employees to use a chatbot to be able to be a better employee. So one of the problems you have is that training takes time. Some of the data they have is episodic. It's not always that common. And so they want to be able to just ask a question of the data internally so they can give a better answer to the customer or just know better what they're doing. So we can turn the chatbot inside. You can give it to the customer or the employee. It works both ways. As a matter of fact, sometimes the customer might know more if you don't do that. So Overstock.com is a customer of ours. They're using it for their agents to be better agents. And we can tell you a couple more over the next couple of months as we launch them with some really interesting companies who are saying our employees are just not getting their turnovers high, you know, their attention span's low, but they do like using the phone to ask a question. So it fits into the way they work.
Yeah, I think the key in that is almost every conversation we have with a prospective client partner ends up at some point in the game being around how do we scale our best communication standard? How do we take the message that we want to send and make sure that message is delivered with the sentiment, the position, the timeliness in the exact fashion so that we can understand the response and get better at it? And that's what this technology is all about. I mean, it's about being able to control a message and recirculate those responses so that you can get better and better and better. And it also, by the way, affords for mechanisms to completely disrupt markets, to change paradigms that have been, you know, ingrained for decades, which is really exciting.
Okay, so to delve a little bit further into the use case discussion, and this is putting you on the spot a little bit, but Brian, this one's going to you. So if you're a major bank and you do not yet have a bot strategy in the sense of you are not looking at deploying a bot on any messaging platforms, what are some things that you should be potentially thinking about doing? So this is be, you know, if it's in the fintech,
Okay.
I guess, sector.
What we think about is a transformation track. So we start thinking about data, which we turn into information, which we then personalize, and then we start to think about the interface. So when we're at that point, I would say to a major bank, if you're considering this, start to look at, you know, go in reverse. So let's just have a moment of fun here. What was the original inception of a bank? What were banks created for? Somebody tell me. Originally.
To take your change when you have like stuff under the sofa.
Yeah, right. They protected our money, right? That's what a bank was created for. Does your bank do that for you? Do any of us walk around wondering if our money is safe in our bank? Most days not, right? The market, that's a different thing. Okay? So the bank is doing what they're supposed to do, right? So what's the next iteration of a bank? Does your bank, let me ask you this question. How does your bank on a daily basis let you down? I would doubt many of us would rush to raise our hands and say, I can tell you many, many ways in which my bank lets me down every day, right? Now, if you have to get on the phone with a contact center person, you might be let down. Here's my point. For banks to succeed into the next millennium, they have to be much more than what they were created for. There has to be a complete, and they know this, there has to be a complete paradigm shift for who you are and what you do for your customers as a bank. And I'll ask this question at the finish of it. What organization knows more about you than your bank?
Facebook.
Well, Google may, right? The FBI may, right? May. Your bank knows about as much about you as anybody else does, sometimes even more than you do. They know your spending habits, they know what you buy, they know where you buy it, they know what mechanism by which you buy it. All of that data moved through that transformation mechanism can be incredibly valuable in creating a complete paradigm shift for what your bank could do for you. And I guess that's a short answer to if I were a bank, what I would.
So you're saying that you could use the bot technology to have build some type of a relationship with the banking customer that utilizes that information to provide them with insights into what they're doing?
I would. How many of us have traveled overseas and had your bank shut your credit card off because your spouse is in one place and you're in another, and you get the head tilt, and then you've got to use minutes to try to fix something, and you're like, I'm the one, I'm the customer here. And it's all under the guise of we're protecting you, right? It just doesn't feel that way. The bank knows you're there already. They know you bought the plane ticket with the credit card, right? If they decide that the paradigm is going to change, then it disrupts everything moving forward. It can.
Okay. So Matt, same question to you, but if you're a major retailer, so you're a retailer, you're doing lots of online business via your website, maybe you have a mobile app, but you don't have any bot strategy yet in terms of deploying something on a messaging platform. What do you think they should do based on your experience with what you're seeing?
Yeah, so if I was a major retailer, I think an obvious one, and most people have probably seen this example, is where I'm going through the checkout process on the website. I'm purchasing new shoes or something. And at the end of that, I have the option to get the receipt emailed to me or sent to my messenger via a bot. That is a super basic example of how a major retailer could use this. I like using Messenger. I would rather have my receipt and track the shipping via Facebook Messenger rather than my email. I think there's been a lot of talk of conversational commerce and people purchasing things through bots. I don't think that technology is quite there. So if I was a retailer, I wouldn't really jump in and say, look, I'm going to showcase all of my products through the bot. And the reason for that is because if I'm shopping, I may not specifically know what I want to get, and I may want to browse. And when I want to browse something, I want to look through the aisles, or I want to scroll through a website, or I want to look at something very visual. Whereas if I'm in a chat interface, it's like this little tiny, box. Everything's mostly text. And for me to be able to come across something that I want to purchase when I don't exactly know what I'm looking to purchase is probably unlikely. Now, in the scenario that the retailer has a very specific product, maybe they only sell one thing, then I think you could create an experience where you sell that through the bot. You could promote content through the bot. You could build up subscribers through the bot. You could launch something. You could build up, do marketing months up until the product comes out, get people subscribed to the bot, and then when the product comes out, instantly notify 1 million people or however many it is, and they could make that purchase directly through the bot. Today, actually, Facebook announced that they are incorporating payment processors into the bot, so you can facilitate purchases super, super, super fast. So those are the things that I would do.
Okay. So I guess, Joe, now the question is, if there's probably a lot of representatives of companies that are here in the room that have already invested a lot of money in an intelligent assistant, virtual agent platform that may be multi-channel, but maybe it's accessible only from the website, but it's very robust. It's already, deflecting all kinds of calls, and it's providing a lot of value to the customers for self-service. If they don't yet have a bot strategy, do they even really need one if they've already got, that robust infrastructure set up and that's doing everything that they need, it needs to do from an ROI perspective for them?
Well, I think that one of the big changes we're seeing in user interface perspective is we shouldn't really legislate for anyone how they should interact with us. Why would we care, right? You want to use an IVR? Go ahead. Have fun with it. You want to call someone? Do that. If you want to use a bot, that's great. If you want to go to the website, go to an app. They all go to the same data on the back end, and it really should be about the choice of the consumer, and I shouldn't care whether it's WhatsApp or WeChat or Facebook Messenger or SMS or any of them. Whoever you partner with, you should make sure that they build an ecosystem-friendly capability for everyone's interactions, commerce, service, whatever it might be, because that's really the way that it will evolve. Because a year ago, like I said this on stage just recently, did we think the Amazon Echo device could actually do service? Could you use it like Capital One is sitting in my apartment that says, what's my bank balance? Could I order an Uber through Amazon Echo? So we don't know what's next. I don't know what the next user interface is going to be. I just want to support them all. And so if I have a very robust platform, I probably am still not touching every one of my customers the way they want to. I just want them all to work together. The big thing, so there's about, I don't know, you can argue 10 million or 15 million agents around the world. They're not going to go away anytime soon. It would be sort of probably problematic to the world economy if they did. So what we want to make sure is that the people also still get connected into this world that is becoming somewhat more virtualized, because there will be times when you have a question that is difficult for any NLU or machine learning or AI or anything, because inference and insight don't come just from data. People see things differently. And so I would like to figure that if I start somewhere, even on any of them, I can get somewhere else easily so that the customer experience is very satisfactory. So just for example, like back to Radisson, there are many times where the question can't be answered by Edward, but we want that question to be satisfied, and it gets routed to maintenance. My air conditioner isn't working, how do you turn it on? Like, that's not an easy question to answer. So the next thing you do is you send a message back that says, we'll have maintenance come up in 15 minutes if that's okay with you, yes or no. And you say, yes, great, no, would you like to reschedule for later? Because you want a person to resolve that. And so we don't think that this is like eliminating people, but complementing and extending.
Okay, so I think we're all in agreement that a company needs to have some kind of bot strategy. So I guess, Brian, the next question to you, and this is going to be my last question, then I'm going to ask the audience for theirs. What are the major investments that you think a company needs to make and start making now if they haven't already made them in order to prepare themselves so that they're ready to take advantage of this capability, that they're ready to go multi-channel with their
I would say first you've got to make a long-term investment in your strategy. So many companies we look at, when you start to talk about this type of an experience, or someone asks you about a bot or an IVA, and you ask them who's responsible for this and where's the budget? Does it sit in IT, marketing, sales, service? People can't answer those questions. And a long-term strategy with a budget and a team behind it, that's sole purpose is to integrate those departments, because we know they're all brought together oftentimes in any one of these solutions we've talked about. That would be the first piece. Knowing that what you've got to do is have a way, again, to actively collect the data, create information out of that data, be able to profile your customers so that you can personalize it, and then work on, no matter what that omni-channel experience is, reaching the customer in the way that they want and need to be reached. And these are, I guess you could walk away from that answer with a well, duh. I'm just letting you know in many, many situations we get called into when we start to look at the, when people say to me, Brian, what are the KPIs that are going to make us successful? And I start to walk through those. There are several of those key metrics that are not in place. Does that make sense with what you're saying?
Yeah, completely. Here, I'll let you in on my strategy here. The first thing I do if I call in a customer, if you're a public company, I read your annual report. On the first page, you're going to tell me how customers are important to you. And the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you how well you execute against that strategy. And if you're honest, you're going to say, not that well. And the reason is because it's hard to consistently execute. We talked about it. How do you train an employee? But part of it is we have all the data inside the company and all the content, and we don't find ways to expose it. This is one of the ways to do that. So the first thing would be, how do I really work on probably the single hardest problem, which is about getting access to the data? Whether it's unstructured or structured data, all of this will be necessary. You can't do this without it. The employee can't be better, the bot can't be better. That would be the first thing that I would do. I don't actually think this is about actually being anything other than better at what you're supposed to do today. If you think about, I don't know, the cable business, for example, I made a call on a couple of large cable companies, and they're just in a churn business, right? Because it's so much opportunity and they don't execute, right? Because it's too expensive to have people phone call. It's too hard to get to the data. It's too hard to do the things you want to do that are very simple, like I just want to watch the Tour de France. That's it. right? Make that easy for me. So we know what we need. We just have to get that data exposed in an easy way. That's probably the single biggest investment that needs to happen to make this all work.
And it can't happen. These things are not independent of one another. While someone's getting their data act together, they have to be moving on the strategy and understanding
Absolutely.
the customer and the rest of the infrastructure. Otherwise, the game's already played.
And you're going to hear from a lot of people, who are going to talk about the magic of machine learning and the magic of all of the stuff that's supposed to happen. I will tell you that, at least from our perspective, that the dictionary and the word relationships, so we started in Radisson. If you get on that thing that goes underground, what is it called? A tube. And if you live in New York, what do you call it? A subway. And if you live in Washington, what do you call it? A metro. And if you live somewhere else, it's a train. And if someone else calls it the 4, all of those things are the same, right? So you have to build those word relationships in the dictionary before the bot can do anything. And so that's what we spend an extraordinary amount of time, and then do it across 20 different languages, so that if I ask it in Chinese or I ask it in Portuguese or ask it in, they all are going to do exactly the same thing. So that's why, yes, fit the strategy to it, but the content engine, and then the machine learning piece, that's cool because that'll look for some patterns, but I actually like just the natural language understanding of the semantic interpretation of what we know in our brains that work for you. So, yes, go.
For some questions from.
I had a question that kind of builds on what you said about when you're trying to go in and either your company looking to, okay, so we need to be developing our own bot strategy, or if you're trying to sell into those organizations, and to kind of, if you could kind of comment on who do you think is going to really own this? Because you talked about reading the company reports and seeing how really important, customer experience is. And a lot of companies, let's be frank, pay a lot of lip service to that. But at the end of the day, it's all about operational savings, and especially in the call center, it's how can you self-contain. So who do you think is going to really truly own this? I mean, we've had this problem with multi-channel, omni-channel as well, right? You have the data problem that's all over the place, and then you have who's going to own it. And when you're trying to sell a solution like a bot strategy, or who's actually going to be owning this, except for a few Radisson type.
Well, in Radisson, it was the president, COO, and head of marketing who bought. That was why that was easy. I think in the contact center, which we've been in business for 40 years, there is the same strategy that sold an IVR can sell a bot, because you can sort of just on a workload basis offload the work of agents onto a bot if you want. I think it's going to be it depends. For the next 12 to 24 months, it's going to be who's the varied sponsors in different organizations who sort of understand the potential. But each industry is going to hit a tipping point in the next 24 months where enough of the market's shifting that it'll hit the budgets. I said this to Dan before. The budgets are going to be big in 2018, because over the next 12 months, people are going to say, maybe this is real. And in the middle to late part of 17, everyone's going to be like, oh my God, I better put money in for 18. And that's when the curve is going to hit. And it'll be in one of them for sure.
I would agree. I think we're still at the point today where we're looking for the strength in the organization. If it lies in service and you truly have a service-oriented team and they've got budget, that's where I would go. I just talked to a group this week they're heavy on the sales side. It's a sales-centric organization. They would tell you, unless we get this right, we can't get the sales we need. We can't get the repeat sales, we can't get the new sales. And we all know that intuitively, but that's where the strength lies in that organization. So I would mirror what you said. I think it's going to be, for some period of time, before it really ends up in the service home, which is where I happen to think it belongs, and I'm steeped in sales training. I think you're going to have a lot of different champions.
Follow the dollar. One more question.
I have a question concerning how do you maintain these most of the time hard-coded questions and answers because we are struggling also with the question like most of the systems you hard code these dialogues into, but how do you make sure they stay up to date with the real content in your CMS system? And is there a way to align both? Because we want to avoid that people get wrong answers that are not up to date with the content on your website anymore.
Start.
I'll start.
I can tell you what we're doing, but you go.
Well, it's just, I think you build yourself controlled environments in use cases. And so when we talk about the controlled environment of a concierge for Radisson, you're at 400 questions. 10,000 questions is a controlled environment.
Still is, yeah.
Outrageously powerful. We're just not thinking in those terms yet. You know, what we will find over time, and we're finding this now, is it's not going to get a lot more than 400 in that controlled use case. As you expand the use case, it can become a 1+. It can become a whole other use case. It's password reset for your phone, and now it's going to password reset for your phone and for Wi-Fi and for. And so what we do is we think about those in controlled environments. But I'm very much in the camp of keeping this information fresh is controllable, because you know, we can cut the answers to 500 questions in a day in a studio.
Yeah.
500 is a lot.
Yeah.
One additional question. Do you think it should be managed in one team? Because we live in a decentralized organization where the content is owned everywhere. Do you think it should be one team that's responsible?
No,
I would say no, and I'm sure
So
both of you
one,
guys would.
actually, interestingly enough, we learned the most through our error reporting when we find questions that don't get answered satisfactorily. So it's actually very, very important to know what fails, not the stuff that actually succeeds. The second thing is that, again, I mean, I don't keep picking, we just learned so much out of Radisson. One of the things that we did was, if there's a question that doesn't have an answer, we immediately capture the question. And so then we can then go put the answer in. The third part of this is that, and I was just talking to Tobias about this, which is that figuring out when to escalate is one way to not get bad answers. So if you escalate at the proper point, you then always satisfy the customer's question rather than trying to force this sort of mechanical answer. And so I'll leave you with the following. You know, if anyone asks me in an elevator, what do you do? At Aspect, I say we route questions, we connect questions to answers. And if you think about that at an abstract level, that would be the challenge for all of us to think about, how do we do that? And a question can be anything. It doesn't matter if it's service or commerce or anything, right? Because that's really what people want ultimately. And if you can get that to happen, you know, sort of, and build some processes around it, it's actually pretty fun, and you should have a good time doing this stuff.
And we can do that now. The NLU is capable of it. We know the knowledge base domain. We know when things should be escalated. So there's a flaw, I think, that is paramount of this has to be an all or nothing. The IVA, the bot, it has to be able to answer everything. It doesn't. By answering 5 of the 7 steps on a 7-track questionnaire and hand that communication off to a contact center rep with a whisper file and a warm handoff, the contact center rep spends a fraction of the time, the customer's happy, everybody wins. So I would encourage you not to think about it as an all or nothing universe.
And on that note, we're out of time.
Right. So let's thank
Thank the
Joe,
panelists.
Brian, and Matt.